because I've had some experience. I've done these recipes before, but I actually have all these recipes written down in a book. And the reason I wrote this book was because people kept asking me for recipes, and which was fine. I'm happy to give a recipe to somebody, but I didn't know what the exact proportions were, because I would do this, and then I would taste. That's one of the biggest things I tell to my students, is to taste as you go. I'm going to turn my heat up here a little bit. Let this come back up to a simmer, but I want to stir it as I go. So I decided that I would start writing down some of my recipes. And I had a bunch of them written down, and I was handing them out. Some of them went out as Christmas gifts with little packages of smoked nuts or whatever it was that I was giving out that year. But after I started doing that, I figured that I realized that I had a pretty nice library, but in each of the recipes had a little story that went with it. Whether it was like the Boy Scout story of how I came up with adding these different ingredients to beef stew, or where I worked when I came up with this recipe, or who I stole it from, or how it was a collaboration or a mistake. One of the coolest recipes that I ever made by mistake was this pancake chicken. We'll do that in another show, but it's really cool. I was trying to make this breaded chicken breast, and it ended up having, the batter was just like pancakes, and we ended up serving it with maple butter. And it was an awesome dish. People raved about it. Like, how can I get the recipe for that? And it's like, all right, let me write it down. All right, so back to this. You can see that it's starting to thicken now. It's starting to warm up. Now, when you make beef stew, the whole idea behind beef stew was that you wanted to use up some cuts of meat that weren't very good. Do not use beef tenderloin for a beef stew. Do not use something that's expensive. Get the cheapest piece of meat you can find, because the whole idea behind beef stew is you're essentially braising it. We seared it in the beginning, we got a little bit of color, and then we're going to cook it with some moisture. As we cook it with the moisture, what's going to happen is that longer moist cooking method is going to break down some of the fibers in the meat, and it's going to make it so it's super tender. Super, super tender. So that's how beef stew and all these stews came out, was because they needed a way to use up the stuff that wouldn't be great on the grill. So long, slow cooking is fantastic. So this is going. I want to take a peek in here. Oh, all right. So these are looking just about done. Let me grab a rag. We'll take these out and you can see, you can actually hear them. I love it when you can hear your food. That's cool. It should be a multi-sensory experience. But check these out. So we've got a little bit of the cheese that is melted out. Our pears are nice and soft now. So I'm just going to stick this off to the side because it's too hot. You wouldn't want to serve this quite yet. I'm going to stick it off to the side. We'll get back to that at the end of our meal. That's also something you can serve cold. You can let it come to room temperature and just serve it like that. I wouldn't really recommend refrigerating them. Believe it or not, the refrigerator is a place with a lot of moisture, and the moisture will actually make those get a little bit soft or mushy. All right. As you can see, I'm kind of keeping an eye on this beef stew because I'm not sure if I want to add some more liquid before I walk away. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more of our beef broth. And we're going to go ahead and let this come up to a simmer and cook so we can make that really tough meat tender. Now I'm going to move over here and we're going to start making our dessert. We're going to get ready for our dessert. So in the cooking industry, there's a term that rules the entire cooking industry, and that's mise en place, and it's a French term that means everything in its place. And that means having all your ingredients prepared and ready to go. So you're not wasting a lot of time walking around the kitchen looking for this or that, or you get halfway through a recipe and you realize that, wait a second, I don't have my beef for my beef stew. So have your mise en place. So get prepped. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so I'm going to take some bananas. Now, Bananas Foster is actually an American invention. It comes from a restaurant named Brennan's in New Orleans. And it was named after one of their patrons, after a regular named Mr. Foster. I forget what his first name was, but that's a true story. That's cool. I'm a big fan of learning the history behind some of these things. That this isn't some classical French dish because it's flambéed. It was actually invented right here in the States. So, I've taken my bananas. I'm going to take them all. I'm going to cut off this little nub at the end just because I don't like the texture of it that much. I'm going to cut them in half this way. Now each of these halves, I'm going to cut in half lengthwise. So I'm going to finish cutting these up. I'm going to get ready to flambe our bananas Fosters right behind me. I'm going to keep an eye on this, make sure we're simmering away. When we get back, we'll finish up our meal. We'll have some of our pears, we'll have some of our beef stew, and our bananas Foster over some ice cream. All right, now our stew has had a chance to simmer a little bit. You can see it's thickened up nicely. Our beef is still a little bit tough. It's got to cook a little longer. I did taste it while we were away, and I realized I forgot one ingredient, which is some Worcestershire sauce. Now, you don't want to add too much Worcestershire sauce because it's pretty strong stuff, but 4 or 5 drops is great. It'll actually help add to the color of your finished stew. We're going to let that simmer like so. Now, onto our bananas Foster. So what we're going to do, I've got all my mise en place together back here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my burner. And I'm going to turn it, this is a pretty strong stove, so I'm only going to turn it on about medium. I'm going to add some melted butter to the pan. It doesn't have to be melted though, but I had some left over. And you want just enough to coat the bottom of the pan, and you can swirl it around. And we're going to go ahead and add our bananas right into the pan. And I'm going to use a spatula. This is a high heat spatula. I recommend only buying high heat spatulas. That way you don't make a mistake and you go to make something like this and you find out all of a sudden your spatula is a 1/4 inch shorter than it used to be because all the plastic's all over your pan. So I'm going to spread these out all in one thin layer so that they get a chance to cook. And I'm going to add some brown sugar. And what we're doing is we're cooking our bananas, but we're also making our sauce. We're going to flavor our sauce with the bananas and brown sugar. So I'm going to sprinkle it around. A little more. Probably about a 1/4 cup total. I'll wipe my hands off right in there. We can give it a little stir. And so what we're looking for is for our bananas to get tender. You don't want to overcook them because they'll be mush, but you want them to get tender so they get rid of any of that little bit of starchiness that a banana may have. So if you want to be daring, you can take them and give them a flip like that, and then go back and then just flip whichever ones didn't flip over. You know, it's always handy if that's your first time to have a cleanup crew ready for you. Make that bargain before you start cooking. I'll cook tonight as long as you'll clean up. All right. So just looking at this and how much sugar we have in there, I want to add a little more sugar to help us develop our sauce. Now, whenever I'm cooking anything sweet, I always add salt. You don't want enough to make it salty, but you want enough because salt is a flavor enhancer. So I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. When you're cooking, food shouldn't taste salty, but you know when it needs salt. It really brings out the flavors that are already there in something. All right, let's stir this around a little bit more. And you'll know when you're getting there, when your sugar has pretty much all dissolved in your sauce, and your bananas are starting to get a little bit mushy. So I'm going to turn my heat up a little bit just so I have some fire here. Now I have here some dark rum. Now whenever you use an alcohol near an open flame, you want to remove your pan from the flame. Go ahead and add your alcohol. Then you can bring it back and you get a little flame, which is great for a little show. So what's happening is the alcohol is actually burning off, all the alcohol that's in there, but we have all the flavor from the rum, so it's actually reducing. So alcohol is burning off, there's steam that's coming off, so our sauce is getting thicker and thicker as we go. All right, I'm going to turn this down just a little bit. Whoops. Actually, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to let it sit right there. I already scooped out my ice cream, so it's already in a nice cold bowl, because this is always served over vanilla ice cream. But you want your ice cream to be nice and cold, so when you pour the screaming hot bananas over it, you actually have a little bit of ice cream to eat instead of just banana soup when you get to it. So I'm going to get our ice cream out. I'm going to go ahead and finish up our stew, and then we'll get Arthur up here and we'll taste some more food. Hey Arthur, welcome back. Thanks for having me again here at Hudson Appliance.
You're welcome. What do we have?
We've got a whole bunch of good stuff. But I need you to turn around and grab the ice cream out of the freezer behind you. You'll see it ready to go. on the top shelf there. So what we've got is we made some bananas Foster. Put it down right there. And then you want to add these bananas right at the last second. Check these out. They're nice and caramely. They're soft. So that's why we kept the ice cream in the freezer that whole time.
Oh, they smell wonderful.
We're going to put them right on there. And they've got their own nice buttery, rich sauce. Put this back here. We'll give that a second to kind of melt and get all nice and creamy. We'll show you we made a beautiful beef stew. Carrots, onions, celery, potatoes, some beef stock. A couple interesting ingredients that you'll have to figure out what they are when you watch the show. Over here we've got, go ahead and grab one of those if you'd like. This is our blue cheese and pear puff. That'll work for you?
Yes.
All right, let's give these bananas a whirl here. Make sure you get a little ice cream and a little banana. Now that's wicked good.